Hello, everyone, and welcome to Voices of the Goddess podcast, where we empower, inspire, and uplift women to be the goddesses they are meant to be. I am Julietta, the magical PT, your co-host here. I live down in Florida, but I am originally from Wisconsin, so you've got two Midwesterners here bringing this show to you. And besides being a very alternative, non-traditional physical therapist, I actually consider myself more a healer. Like sometimes I have a hard time this far in, like still calling myself a physical therapist, but whatever, I am. But I'm also an artist, a jeweler, a traveler, a reader. I don't know. I'm every woman. Shaka Khan is in my head now.
What was that razor commercial when we were growing up? Remember the razor commercial with the women walking?
Exactly.
That makes us sound really old, but you know.
You're right. And we are and we're not at the same time.
Right.
It's just a number.
It's just a number.
Why don't you introduce yourself, Allison?
So my name is Allison Mancini. I'm a holistic nutritionist, and I am also here in South Florida. I've been here for 28 years now. But I do consider home Michigan. So Julietta and I are both Midwesterners. I'm a Michigander. She's a Wisconsinite. And
Check that out. Get it, Shaka. Maybe that's our next video.
Oh my gosh, that's it. Jess, you take note of that. That's our next video. That's for our 100th episode. Okay, sorry. And so I am a mom to two amazing young adults. They are 25 and 22. I am a wife to an amazing husband of 28 years. We've known each other over 30 years. That's like way more than half my life. And I'm a holistic nutritionist. So I went through a lot with my kids. My daughter has some medical conditions. And so we really struggled through all of her life with that and found that nutrition was a great way to help assist her in getting through all of that. My son went through some stuff. He was an athlete. And so we really dealt with nutrition with him. And I had my own personal experience of getting really sick because I was trying to do it all. I was being one of those moms that was trying to do everything and take care of everybody and not taking care of myself. So my passion really is about helping busy moms take care of themselves because it's a trickle down effect. If they're taking care of themselves, then they're taking care of their families and it just kind of keeps going. So that's my passion. My passion is to leave a legacy of good nutrition. So, and I'm excited to be here today. We are at 60 plus episodes, which is so cool, right? Like, who would have thought when we started this?
I know. When we started this, I was like, yeah, let's do this. But I really had no idea that it was going to turn into this. It's so amazing. It's been a lot of fun, a little bit of stress, but mostly a lot of fun. And just really cool, all of the women that we've interviewed so far. I was actually thinking that as I was driving in over here to, I'm normally sitting in my office when we record, and as I was driving in, I was actually like thinking about that this morning, like how many amazing women we've interviewed. And then I got thinking about how many more amazing women are we going to interview going forward with this thing. Like,
what I think is so cool, and I want to encourage our audience, because this is something you and I talk about a lot, is that we started this having no clue what we were doing, right? Like so when we went into the pandemic, Juliette and I knew each other through a business association that we're both in, and we've become good friends. And in the pandemic, everyone was really struggling. People were losing jobs. People didn't know what to do with themselves. They were having to, I hate the word, but pivot and do whatever, and so she and I are like, okay, how can we help support all these incredible women that we know? Because we know between the two of us, we know so many amazing women. And then I said to her one day, I've always wanted to start a podcast. And she's like, I figured for sure you would say to me, yeah, no, I have no interest in that. And you were like, okay. And I was like, oh my, okay. And so
I'm a yes girl now. Like, as long as something is not, like, if I don't feel like in danger doing it, I'm a yes girl, because, like,
yeah, So we
Just
started,
try. Who, like, what's
right.
the word happen? You fail, and failing's not really failing. It's failing's just learning. So, and sometimes I feel a little nervous when I put out there to the world that I'm a yes girl now, because who knows what someone's going to throw at me when I
You
say that.
do,
But
right? Have you ever watched,
whatever, bring it. Let's do it.
wasn't it Jim Carrey that movie was something he had to say yes to?
Yeah.
That's a funny movie. Anyways, so back to the podcast. So when we started it, we really just wanted to support women. We had absolutely no clue what we were doing. I knew a tiny bit. I had a friend who had started a podcast. A coach I was working with had a podcast. So we kind of knew a little bit. And then we found our amazing producer, and she's been awesome. And it just kind of went from there. And then she made that super fun video for us, right? I love it. I keep
If you
watching
haven't seen the video, check it out.
I keep watching it. It's so much fun. I'm like, it's so fun.
And she did an amazing job editing it, and I'm proud of both of us, because that was definitely outside our comfort zone. And and here, like, I don't know that I need Jess to know that I'm a yes girl, because what else is she gonna throw at us as our producer to do? Because that video was her idea, and I was like,
it was her idea. Yeah.
All right, let's just do it. I'm like, I'm a yes girl, so I'm gonna dance for everybody.
Okay, I'm just putting it out there right now, Jess. I will not jump out of an airplane, so I will be a yes girl to anything but that. That's not my thing. All right. So with that said, we should probably bring our guest on, because
yes, let's bring on our guest.
Let's do it. Hello, Carol.
Hello.
Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm excited to be here.
Yay! Well, will you please take a few minutes? Oh, Jess just wrote she's coming up with ideas right now. Oh, no.
Oh, Lord. Oh, my. Help me. Okay, be nice, be kind.
But anyway.
I'm with you. I am not jumping out of a plane. No.
So, Carol, will you please take a few minutes and just introduce yourself to our audience? Tell them a little bit about who you are and what you bring to this life.
You were saying earlier about, before we got on the show, that you had brought Marty Elberg on, right? And you mainly bring up women, but Marty's a special man, right? So when I walk into a networking room and people say, "What do you do?" And I say, "Well, I help female business owners and a few good men, right? Just like you guys do, right? Right, to know their value, own their power, and advocate for themselves, so they rise up and become the lioness and lion leaders they were created to be." And this has resulted in many of them doubling and tripling the income in their business. How did I get there, though? I'm an ex-collegiate and professional tennis player who then spent 26 years very successfully as a sales expert for Fortune 100 companies, AT&amp, Sprint, and Paychex. And then back in the summer of 2014, I thought I had it made, right? I'd sold $70 million in revenue, walked the stages, gotten the awards. I could do this in my sleep. I thought I had it made. Until the day I got that phone call. And they told me they were cutting my territory by 80%.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, I've been building this territory for 6.5 years, right? Well, you didn't have to tell me twice. I thought they were setting me up to fail. Now, I was a weird salesperson. I loved large corporate structure, and I'm a rule follower. Not true for most salespeople, especially in corporate America. But a friend of mine whispered in my ear about an opportunity at this really small company. So I thought, I don't know what I don't know, and off I went. After 2 interviews, they gave me the job. They doubled my base salary plus commissions, gave me a director title. I could just see the potential, right? So there I was, 6 weeks into the job, and I was actually on vacation. I negotiated it up front, being what I thought at the time was a good employee. Now, what does Maya Angelou tell us? When you learn better, you do better. But back then, I thought a good employee stayed in touch with their boss while they were on vacation. I do not advocate that for my clients today. So I got an email asking my opinion on something, and I replied right back. And I waited because he usually replies right back. 12 hours later, ladies, you won't believe it. We came in from dinner. Ding, Carol Boston, you've got mail. Here's what it said. It said, Carol, comma, that's what you really think? And it had 5 question marks behind it. Then it said, do not come into this office on Monday when your vacation is over. You are done here.
Oh my God.
I don't get fired. Did I just get fired in an email?
Holy crap.
For an opinion I was asked for? Now, one of the reasons I say I help my clients advocate for themselves is because I didn't do that back in 2014. Florida's an at-will state. I thought, oh, well.
Mhm.
And I came back and I had an interview the very next day. And for many, many, many months, I was companies spent money on me, sometimes 3 and 4 interviews deep, and I couldn't get a job. I thought, how ironic. I could sell $70 million for somebody else, and I can't close a deal to get myself a job. I depleted my 401k. I did this for so long. And part of that is because I couldn't get out of my own way, right? I was stuck in my jar. All I could see is that I was this buttoned up corporate sales professional. So faith is my foundation, and that's where I always go. So many months into this, I pretty much yelled at God. I'm like, God, you created me. You know I'm not cut out to be an entrepreneur. I do not want to own my own business. You got to help me find a good job. 2 weeks to the day from that prayer, out of the blue, I get an email from a woman I met one time out of town at a conference, and she gifted me a $3,500 ticket to go to Los Angeles to study at Guerrilla Business School. So you see, my God has a sense of humor, because Guerrilla Business School is what? A foundational school for entrepreneurs. So I figured, I don't know what I don't know, and off I went. And the very first thing I learned is become the title to my next book that's coming out next year, and it's going to be called You Can't Read the Label When You're Inside a Jar. And we're all in a jar.
That's so great.
And so as a coach, I tell my clients, but I can read your label, and I can help you write a new label so you can step into who you were truly created to be and let go of that story from the past. And you asked earlier how I got the name Queen of Reframe. Well, the second thing I learned, this is in May of 2015, and I've been working for 6.5 years to master the art of crafting empowering questions. I was so blown away by their capability for change that I began studying with some of the best in leadership: John Maxwell, Michael Strassner, Lisa Nichols, Nurka. People say, well, Carol, what's Nurka's last name? I'm like, I don't know. She never says. But she's a genius when it comes to empowering questions. And so I got on this path and studying. But guess what? I was still stuck in my jar. I couldn't give up the idea that I was a salesperson. So let's fast forward real quick, 2.5 years, the fall of 2017. And there I was, getting my second coaching certification and still holding on to 3 services to try and sell into corporate America. And then I learned a big lesson. This is a writer downer for your community. There's a big difference between being committed to something and being convicted. Because people decommit every day, don't they? They say, well, I'm committed to this marriage for life till the day I'm not. Right? But when you're convicted, you will not rest until you get it done. And you understand that your comfort and your convenience and your conviction, they don't live on the same block. They're not even in the same zip code. And that's when I dropped those 3 services and I went all in. And that was January of 2018. I had been coaching people, but that became my focus. And so for my clients, I bring the discipline of being a professional athlete and the savvy of a very successful sales career to bear for them and their businesses. And that's what got me here today.
That's awesome.
That is quite the story.
Yeah, you're a great storyteller too. That is so fantastic. And I love the athletic background. Like, I totally get that. So that's really cool.
Yay. Well, we better dive into the questions.
Let's do it.
So the first question, Carol, is what is your superpower?
Man, I have several. I'll give you one of them. I am really, really good, and I've really come to know this just in the last year after COVID started, that I am really good at getting people into effective action very quickly to get immediate results. I have a lead gen call. Right now it's called Finish the Fourth Quarter Strong, and it's $97 for 90 minutes. It's a 90% discount, right? But it really allows me to help people and for them to get something to move them forward right away. And that's what I learned in this. I started it back in February. Remember when that snow hit Texas and Mexico and everybody was frozen?
I thought, yes, my daughter was there. She's in Texas. Yeah.
So I thought, I'm the Queen of Reframe. What can I do? So I decided I would have a Snowmageddon call. That's what I called it. It was a Snowmageddon call, $97 for 90 minutes, clarity to cash. You're going to get totally clear on what's holding you back, right? and some effective action steps to take you from where you are to where you want to go faster and easier. And so I started, and people were booking these calls, and it was amazing. And it not only helped them, but it showed me a lot of things. And I had this one lady, she was working on 4 different areas, right? None of them were really growing. So we have our call, and I say, outline them for me. So she gave me 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, part of my coaching to her was, I want you to take number 4 and I want you to make it number 1. And she kind of groaned at me. She looked at me on the Zoom and she goes, oh, Carol, really? I don't want to do that one. And I said, do you trust me? And she said, yes. I said, great. Move number 4 to number 1. And then I gave her the steps I wanted her to take. And we were going to have a follow-up to see how accountability, to see how she did on her homework in 2 weeks. In those 2 weeks, she grew her business in that lane 33% in 1 month.
Nice.
So I began to see that I'm really good at getting people into effective action to get immediate results. That's just one of my superpowers.
That's awesome.
One of them.
That's a great superpower to have, and it's got me thinking. All right, and I'm just like so curious about what the answers to all of these questions are going to be. So the next one is, what is either your favorite book or the book that has most greatly influenced you?
Well, I'm going to cheat and give you 2. I'm great.
Almost everybody does. It's so hard to pick one.
It is. So I've been greatly influenced by the Bible. People don't realize that it's an amazing business book, right? You don't even really have to be a believer, but if you study, it's a great business book. And the other book that has greatly impacted me, I'm actually going to be crafting a workshop just around this book. And it's by Erwin Raphael McManus, and it's called The Last Arrow. And, part of what I'm going to leave the people with after we teach them and train them and inspire them is, my prayer for you is that you die with your quiver empty and your heart full. Are you willing to shoot all of your arrows? And it actually starts off with he's actually a pastor, and it starts off with a biblical reference talking about Elisha and Elijah, when Elisha was the king and he was in ill health, and they were very afraid for him to die. And his number 1 man didn't want him to die because he was helping them win all the wars. So he told him, I want you to take your arrow and shoot it through the east window. And he did. And he proclaimed something over him. And then he said, I want you to take your arrows and strike the ground. So he took some arrows out of his quiver. Not all of them, that's important. Took some arrows out of his quiver, and he struck them on the ground 3 times, and he stopped. And Elisha the king got really upset. And he said, why did you stop at 3? Guy's kind of shrugs his shoulders. And he said, but you have 6. Now you're only going to win 3 of the next 6 wars. So it's about not quitting. Because people who hear my story, you ladies don't know half of it. I tell people that my job is just to trust in the process and take the next step, right? That I believe God gave me a lamplight for my feet, because all I have to see is the next step. Mm-hmm. And that's a lot of what this is about. Are you willing to trust in the process and shoot all of your arrows? Because oftentimes I find with clients and just with people in general when I give talks, is they're trying to hold on so tightly to yesterday's blessings that they miss today's miracles, right?
Yeah, it's very true.
Are your hands open to receive all that God in the universe has to give you today? And another thing I would tell you, and this book doesn't really touch on that, but it made me think about this, is that oftentimes people are caught in the tension between 2 truths. The truth of who they think they are, based on their experience and what other people tell them, and the truth of who they were truly created to be. And that's that's a first step I help every client with, is getting clarity on who they were created to be, so that we can then step into that and create the life and business of their dreams. Kind of a long-winded answer for a book, but
it was really great. I'm sitting here thinking myself, I need to be clear on that. I think that's amazing.
Clarity is power, and people don't understand that. I had one client, quick story, female family lawyer, had been in business for 4 years, and she hired me back in early 2018. And as a part of this clarity process, one of the things I help them do is craft very empowered statements, right? I'm the Queen of Reframe, empowering questions. This is about having an empowered statement. So one of the statements I crafted for her was, I'm a powerful CEO of a fast-growing law firm. She looked at me like I had lost my mind. She's like, my law firm's not growing. Why the hell you think I hired you? So when the leap is too big, when the stretch is too far, for my private clients, I have a phrase that I give them to put in front of it to help them begin to bridge that gap. And so over time, I don't know if it took 2 months or 3 months, and she was in my 6-month program. She walks in my office one day. Now, she was already taller than me, and she had on heels, and I'm looking up at her. And she walks in and she goes, I'm a powerful CEO of a fast-growing law firm. And I was like, yes. Now, we did a lot of other work, but this was so foundational that if you go look on my website, part of her testimonial is, I got more clients in the first 6 months of working with Carol than I did in the first 4 years of my practice. Part of that was owning who she was created to be, right? Powerful CEO of what? A fast growing law firm. And I saw her, I spoke, my first live speaking engagement was at a luncheon back at the end of February, post-COVID. She happened to be one of the co-chairs of the luncheon. So we sat down, I was eating afterwards, and I asked her how things were going. She goes, Carol, some of those things you had me do, I thought they were so woo-woo. And, I was challenged in getting started with you. She said, but oh my God, my business is still exploding. She goes, I just hired another paralegal. I'm bringing on a partner. The power of getting clear on who you were created to be is tremendous.
That's awesome.
Excellent.
It's like mic drop. I have nothing for myself. And yes, ditto. There you go. Right there.
All right. So you're creating a lot of amazing stuff out there for people, but to be able to do that, you have to take care of you first. So what is your favorite self-care practice, Carol?
My favorite self-care is going to the gym. And I have a super, super clean diet. That goes back to like 1979. People look at me like, are you crazy? Like, I haven't eaten anything fried. I hate butter. I don't eat butter. And I haven't eaten hamburgers, hot dogs, or pizza since 1979.
Wow.
And in looking back at how I did that, and back in 1989, I was actually carried out of the gym in an ambulance. And they put me on a monitor and all these things were going on. It turns out that my blood pressure and my blood sugar were very, very low. Very low. And I remember my doctor looking at me going, Carol, look at all those files I have. I've seen thousands of patients. He goes, you're the healthiest female I've ever seen. But you could die tomorrow of a heart attack if you don't deal with your stress. And I'm like, what stress? I just had my best quarter in sales. I'm getting ready for a bodybuilding show. And he was like, well, let's talk about that. Well, long story short, I was working about 16, 18 hours a day when he looked at that whole process. And they didn't know much about hypoglycemia back then. So I began to read and study. I was so sensitive that one time I put ketchup on a baked potato. It made me so sick. I crawled across this nasty carpet of the apartment hallway. I was so sick to knock on the neighbor's doors. Can I just lay on your couch? Because I was afraid they were going to have to send me to the hospital. So I go to this birthday party during this time period. And during this time period, I drank no alcohol, no caffeine, or no sugar to try to regulate it. Mm-hmm. And they were serving apple. Now, I'm a girl from the South. I love my apple pie, right? So they were serving apple pie. And this friend of mine goes, oh, no, don't give Carol any. She can't have any. I said, yes, I can. She goes, no, you can't have any. And I said, yes, I can. I said, I can eat anything I want if I'm willing to pay the price. Yeah. And I'm not willing to pay the price. So I'm choosing not to eat that pie. And let me tell you, folks, there's power in choice. I have never felt denied anything. So even back then, like one of my superpowers is, mindset mastery. So even back then, in looking back, that was part of one of my superpowers.
Yeah, I agree with you. That bringing up diet, obviously being a nutritionist, but my own experience, I had to go gluten and dairy free about 13 years ago. And I have people ask me all the time, isn't that hard? How do you do that? And I'm like, listen, the reality is I can eat it. I'm not going to keel over from it, but I sure will pay for it for a good 2 to 3 days. I said, and it's not worth it. Like, it's not worth it to not be able to leave my bathroom for 24 hours because I can't get out of the bathroom long enough to do anything. Right. It's just like you just said, it's just power and choice. I mean, sure, I can, and I've done it. I've gone and eaten in Italy, fresh mozzarella. I couldn't pass it up. And we were on a cruise ship and we were doing daytime excursions. And the next day I barely made it through the tour that we were on because I ate a whole, thing of caprese salad with fresh mozzarella. Granted, it was delicious.
Oh,
And
yeah.
my kids were like, I can't believe you're eating that, Mom. And I'm like, oh my gosh. I'm like, it's so good. We're in Italy. I have to eat this. And I kid you not, it was almost 3 days before I felt better. So yeah, I paid.
I'm with you. I understand. It's a challenge.
Yeah. But you know what? It's not like you just said, it's power and choice. I don't really miss it because I know what will happen, right? Like I know that the outcome is not a good outcome. So it's really nothing to miss anymore. So yeah, I get that.
Well, the cool thing is you're totally clear about that. And I say clarity
Yeah.
is power, and there's power in choice.
Yeah.
So all of what you just said that you're doing, all of that ties in.
Yeah.
And so often people don't even realize that they're giving up their power all the time.
Yep.
Right? Anytime you blame anything outside of you, you just gave up your power.
Yeah,
Anything.
Julia. Yeah, we talk about that, and I find that's challenging because as I said in the beginning, I have 2 young adult children, and they're pretty. I'm proud of them. They're pretty well rounded, but making those choices and knowing that it's your responsibility, right? That's a hard lesson to learn for young people. I really believe it is, and it's a hard lesson for adults, right? I mean, for older adults, but younger adults, it's especially now because everything comes so quickly and easily and accessible, and that's a hard lesson to learn.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
Yeah.
All right. Time for our final question. And this came out of research. We interviewed a lot of women that were, people that we thought would be listening to this podcast about, what's important to them and what would they like support with. And the thing that came up over and over again was creating accountability. So how do you create accountability, Carol?
Well, number one, I have a coach. I actually happen to have 3 right now, right? I did a 90-minute workshop for the Fort Lauderdale Chamber of Commerce a couple of years ago, and I happened to mention at one point in my talk that Warren Buffett had a coach, and some young man in the audience grumbled something under his breath. Now, I never said Warren Buffett had a financial coach. I just said he had a coach. Mm-hmm. So I asked this young man if he was willing to stand up and play, and he said yes. So here's one of the things I would give to your audience. It's key. When you can embrace this will change your entire life. That other people's judgments and opinions of you are none of your business because they're not about you. They're about them. I tell my clients all the time, there's only 2 kinds of business, right? There's my business and there's none of my business. And so his judgment of Warren Buffett had nothing to do with Warren Buffett. It had to do with where he was financially and what he was thinking. I also happened to mention that at one point, Oprah Winfrey had 4 coaches, and she did. And someone asked her, what in the world was she doing with 4 coaches? And she said, I want to know that I'm growing every quadrant of my life to the highest level. And nobody is an expert in all 4 quadrants. So I would say number 1 from accountability, get a coach. Personal self-accountability. I just have to tell you, it's hard as hell to be an entrepreneur, and having your own accountability, I'm proof that it just doesn't work, because that's how I started in the beginning. It just doesn't work. I think it's key.
I'm right there with you. And we both are. And what's interesting, I had someone bring this up to me a couple of years ago, and you being a collegiate tennis player, you can understand this, right? You had a coach all your time being a tennis player, right? You needed a coach. That was important so that you could be the best that you could be. Somewhere along the line, we think that doesn't transfer to life and business, right? Like my daughter was a competitive dancer. My son was a hockey player. They had coaches all their lives. Like we hired coaches to work with them privately as group, you know what I mean? That was what they did. And we didn't think twice about it. But for some reason, as adults, we don't think we need that anymore. And I find that, and I'm guilty of it because I didn't hire my first coach until just 2 years ago. And I kick myself. So if you're younger and you're listening to this in our audience, hire a coach. And there's so many different coaches you can work with out there. You will find exactly what you need for the season of your life. And it changes. I've worked with different coaches in the past for different reasons. And I'm sure that you see that a lot in your industry and the clients you work with.
Absolutely.
And you just said you have 3 coaches yourself. My coach, she has like 4 coaches too. Like she has coaches. So it's really
every coach needs a good coach, because here's the deal. We're all committed to our jar. And one of the things that empowering questions do is they help you get the answers that are sitting right outside your jar.
Mm-hmm.
They open the door to possibility. They cause you to be curious and to ponder. They create what I call Oprah aha moments, right? Because those, if the answer was inside your jar, you'd already have it, and then there wouldn't be any need for a coach.
Right.
Right. So I believe that we were all put here on this earth with everything that we needed already inside of us. We just don't know how to ask the right questions to get to the answers. You know, one of the things I keep in mind all the time is Voltaire said, do not judge a man by his answers. You judge him by his questions. And one of the things, I believe it was Benjamin Franklin said, he said, if I was given an hour to come up with a solution and my life depended on the answer, he said, I would spend the first 55 minutes crafting the right question. Because once I have the right question, I can get the answer in 5 minutes. Questions are really, really powerful. And I'll give your audience one quick, this is a writer downer. We don't have time to like teach on this at all. But an empowering question never, ever, ever starts with the word why. Come on, parents, you're asking your kids why all the time and you don't get the answers you want. You end up in what? Typically an argument. Why brings in defensiveness, which brings in the ego, which brings in emotions. And when emotions go up, intelligence goes down. It's true for every human being, whether those emotions, whether you judge those emotions good or bad, right? People have decided that anger is bad and happiness is good. And people will tell me, oh yeah, Carol, man, I hate it when I get so angry and I say something I regret. I said, but what about the lady who goes to Las Vegas to have a good time? And she wakes up the next day with some dude in her bed and a ring on her finger. And she's like, what the hell? Right? She had a good time, but her emotions were out of control. So intelligence goes down. Do I have time for one quick example of that?
Yes.
Okay. So when I was in 7th grade, I came home with my report card and I was so excited. I had 5 A's and a B. I could not wait for my dad to get home. So I give him now, you might can tell from my accent, I'm from the South, but my dad, he's from the deep South, right? So he looks at my report card and he says, now, Carol, why'd you get a B? What do you think I did? I got defensive. I said, but Dad, I got 5 A's. He looked at me again. He goes, that is not what I asked you. Why'd you get a B? So then I got defensive and I used my older brother. I go, but David got 2 C's and a D. My dad said to me, and we expect a lot more out of you, young lady. Now, how I heard that as a child and the story I told myself then is that I had to be perfect to earn love. That impacted every area of my life for decades until I was able to reframe it, right? Overgiven relationships and not get my needs met, workaholic at work. Now, now here's the good news. I wouldn't be here in front of you today if he had asked me a different question. I just wouldn't be here. But as a parent, instead of saying to your child, why did you get that bad grade? Or why are you breaking curfew? What if you had phrased it like this? Empowering questions are specific and they're time bound. If he had said to me, Carol, what one thing, just one, could you do differently next semester, time bound, to improve upon that grade? We would have had a completely different discussion. And if I come up with the answer, I am way more likely to do it. Yeah. Another key with empowering questions is you cannot be attached to the outcome, right? Not to be attached to the outcome. That means you can't be attached to how the answer shows up. And you're not to try to figure the answer out. Because the answer is what? It's outside of your jar. What can I say? I have parents say, can you put a course together for parents on that? And I'm like,
yeah, I feel like you should. I mean, because you know what? My growing up was one of my parents was very like kind of passive about the whole thing. He wouldn't have directly said that. I guess I just said it was my dad. He wouldn't have directly said that. He would have just been disappointed in the lack of getting all A's. So I always felt like I had to be perfect. That was the feeling I always got. But it's interesting that you bring up the question part, because one of the things, I have always been a very curious kid. It used to drive my parents nuts because I asked so many questions all the time. And I'm sorry, as the dog is barking in the background. I would ask so many questions and it would drive them crazy. And so I stopped asking questions. I got to a point in my life when I quit asking because it seemed to me I was bothering people. And I decided years ago, I'm like, nah, I'm asking questions. Like, that's how you figure things out. You have to ask questions. And I try to stay away from why questions. I ask more of how, because I'm always curious how things are the way they are. How do you do that? You know what I mean? But I think that's really enlightening. Thank you for sharing that with our audience. I think that was great. And maybe you should consider doing a parenting thing. Even just a course, kind of like a parenting online course about how to ask the right questions.
Well, what's interesting is empowering questions help you get other people on the same page as you more quickly and with less resistance. Who wouldn't like that, right? Mm-hmm. It prevents tons of arguments because it takes the emotion out of the conversation.
Right.
Here's one of the key things that it does. It helps you see who's truly in resistance, because oftentimes we think it's the other person and it's us. Mm. It's us. And empowering questions will show us that, about where we need to make changes or where we can make changes or the opportunity, as opposed to thinking that the resistance is always outside of us. Because it isn't. It isn't.
This was fabulous. Thank you so much for sharing. Like, you shared so much rich information for our audience. I'm really excited for them to all hear this. So thank you.
Fantastic.
And I'm going, okay, it's time for takeaways. I'm like, how do you choose one takeaway from
I have a takeaway. Wait, I do have one. Mine is the clarity part. So as I was listening to Carol talking about that, I realized that I'm somewhat clear, but not totally. And this is why I realized that, because I still have my foot into, I have my feet in two separate ideas and paths. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And I need to be clear. And I know which path I really want to do. For some reason, I'm still holding on to this little dribbling of one path, and I just need to let that go. And I think it's because I don't have clarity. So I would say I need to get very clear on where I'm going.
Are you open to some feedback?
Sure.
Because 4 times in that sentence you said, I need to. I'm going to encourage you to reframe that and say, I have the opportunity to. I get to.
I get to. I have been told that, so I get to.
Well, need comes from a place of lack.
Yep.
And you don't. It's very clear to me you understand there's abundance in the world. There's abundance everywhere.
Yeah.
And we create as we speak, right? It's actually biblical. We have to call things that aren't as though they are. We have to create it than we see. I want you to think about that. That is so powerful as how I get my clients to do what? See who they were created to be. Mm-hmm. It's a good business book.
I find it fascinating. I had never looked at the Bible. I grew up in a Christian household. My kids went to a Christian private school. And I never considered that. It's a really interesting, yeah.
And it made me think about, we do our book club every month. And the first book that we did came from one of our previous guest on the show, was Spiritual Economics. And when we picked up the book and started reading it, I had no idea, but there is so much reference to the Bible in that book. And that was eye-opening for me. It's like, yeah. So, all right. My takeaway, there were so many, but the thing that's resonating and sitting with me today is just focusing on the power of choice. And when I'm when life gets hectic and crazy, we make choices without necessarily even thinking about why am I making this choice, and what's behind that choice, and am I making the choice that is most powerful for me? And so just this week has been kind of hectic. And if I can just slow down in my head a little bit, and when I'm choosing, focus on the power of making that choice. So thank you for that. What is your takeaway today, Carol?
I just have fun. I could do this all day, every day. I have fun.
I think you could.
I told you I'm an easy interview.
For sure. No, and this is definitely because I've not had my experience of you in the past has not been on this level, and so to see this is truly a gift for you, being able to speak and tell stories and bring so much meaning and information. This has been awesome.
when you mentioned Marty earlier, we were in that bucket list. I don't know if you recall that this is August of 2018. I believe we did that, right?
I think
And
so.
one of the things on my bucket list was, and I actually became a speaker. There's been 3 pivotal times in my life where I trusted in someone else's vision for me until I could believe it for myself.
Mhm.
And that's what allows me to hold that space for my clients, right? So that's how I became a professional speaker. So one of my bucket list items was to speak in front of 5,000 people. Well, fast forward to 2019, and I got hired 6 times by American Express to come in and teach and train and speak. And so one of the ones was a group out of Denver. Shannon, great lady. I'm so excited. I'm thinking, yes, I'm going to get to go to Denver, get out of this heat. I was so excited. She says, yeah, you're not coming to Denver. What? She goes, all my employees are remote. This is, well before COVID. And I'm like, well, how many employees do you have? What do you think she said?
5,000. Nice.
And so I said, do they all get to listen at the same time? Because see, I was giving myself this parameter that they all had to hear it. I was thinking on stage, 5,000. And she said, no, our platform only allows 500 at a time, but we have all these metrics and we're going to replay it and on and on and on. So as we began doing this, I said to her, can I stand up while I do it? She's like, yeah, no, I don't think so. Nobody's ever done that. And I kept pushing back. Because why? All I had done was stand up and speak on stage and in front of people. And that's where I felt grounded. But one of the things I help my clients with is you only grow outside of your comfort zone, right? Discomfort is the price of admission to a meaningful life. We have to be willing to get uncomfortable. So I quit pushing back and I go out to this office at Sunrise up here, the American Express, on the Monday before the event. And a gentleman was there. His name was Abad. Great guy. He goes, I figured out how you can do it standing up. And I said, thank you, but I'm going to sit down. And he said, you are? And I said, yeah, I'm going to get out of my comfort zone. It's an opportunity to grow. So for an hour, I sat down and gave my talk. Think about that. Fast forward a few months, and all of a sudden, all I can do is speak like this because everything shut down. Everything now was over Zoom. Everything was online, everything. So it actually gave me a foundation and a practice to be able to start to try to do that.
So awesome how the universe works like that.
Yep. Love that.
All right.
Well, we should probably wrap up.
We need to wrap up. Thank you so much for joining us today, Carol. This has been an amazing episode, so chock full of all kinds of golden nuggets for our audience. So thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners out there. If you've liked what you heard today, please subscribe, like, and share it with other goddesses out there. And, if you want to get in touch with Carol or any of us, you'll find all her information in the show notes. And yeah, it's been a great episode. Thank you so much. Have a magical day, everyone.
Blessings.
Bye-bye.